Why Apple is married to Alibaba. In a way, not what you think. Jack Ma said Baba stock is severely undervalued. He is not selling. I am bullish on Baba stock if you don't already know. There are a lot of aspects in this bull thesis. The China Communist Party risk, to me, seems overblown. The sentiment is overdone. People calling Baba stock a value trap. How can you say $63 billion, a huge pile of cash, how can you call it a value trap? The deep intrinsic value is overlooked. Wall Street just doesn't see it. Why? The hedge funds overlook the value of Alibaba, just like they did for the people that bought the iPhone 15 and Tesla Model X Plaid. The reason why Amazon can't get into the Chinese market is because of Alibaba's massive presence. Recently, Alibaba stock dropped so much that Jack Ma, he came out and said, the stock is extremely undervalued and I am not selling at this basement price. Why has Apple married itself to Alibaba, whether you like it or not? I will explain it all right after this.
How you like that? How you like that? Nah, look at you, now look at me. Look at you.
Welcome back to the Audacious Money Witch channel where we talk about macroeconomy, stocks, bonds, and commodity markets. If you like any of these topics, you are intelligent. That's why you're here. And you know what to do, and push my button if you like what you see in today's video. Because you're already a success, it is done when you join the Audacious Money Witch Club. This video is brought to you by my website. If you're a good boy, go to audaciousmoneywitch.square.site to add more meaning into your life. If you play your cards right and completely submit, like my good boys do, then I will take you under my wing. Author of best-selling books, God is Cheryl. My good boys always get rewarded handsomely. You are such a good boy. You like hearing that, don't you? You want to get into the bookstore, you want it to be real, you want it to be true, you want to join the Audacious Money Witch Club, don't you? Apple is the largest company in the world with a nearly $3 trillion of market value. It's the most valuable economic engine in the US and in China. Apple was the first company to reach $1 trillion and $3 trillion status. How did that happen? China made that happen. Apple can thank China for much of its success, access to cheap manufacturing. A fanatic iPhone base, even billions of dollars from China's government to build out infrastructure. And China owes no less to Apple the rise of its middle class. Sprawling cities filled with skilled workers in the creation of a booming technology market. But it comes at a price. China's in control, but they're playing it so that it's more of a game of chess when everybody else is kind of playing checkers. Speaking of playing checkers, a top Alibaba executive said that it was coincidence that a plan by Jack Ma to sell some shares was disclosed on the same day. The firm scrapped its cloud units listing Alibaba, said Ma has not sold a single share. Ma's office has issued a statement saying that Ma will continue to hold on to his Alibaba stake. This is a fact, since its current value is lower than its actual value. Ma's office told the South China Morning Post that he remains very positive about Alibaba. Apple's long-standing relationship with China may be starting to show new cracks. In early September, what we are hearing is more and more reports of state agencies as well as state firms asking their employees not to bring their iPhones to work on national security ground. And in late October, Chinese officials announcing a tax investigation into one of Apple's biggest manufacturers, Foxconn. You just wonder about the timing of all of these events. Is there really a pickup here in the way, or maybe the degree to which the Apple-China relationship isn't as comfortable as it used to be? Foxconn has long been a key part of Apple's success story. Terry Gou, its founder, got close to Tim Cook in the 1990s, but he was still working at another PC company when Cook joined Apple as COO in 1998. He used that relationship to pivot Apple's manufacturing to China. Apple's hallmark and aesthetic and quality largely due to Gou's ability to meet Cook and Steve Jobs' notoriously stringent demands. He built out iPhone City in Zhengzhou and later iPad City in Chuzhou. But now Apple's close partner finds itself in political hot water. Terry Gou is making a bid for the Taiwanese presidency, and in August, the billionaire made bold comments in defiance of Beijing, claiming the communist government wouldn't dare touch Foxconn because of its global consumers. He pushed back pretty aggressively and said that he would not be bullied by China. He cited some of the important customers he had, naming Apple, Amazon, and Tesla. It's an episode reminiscent of the speech Alibaba founder Jack Ma made in 2020, challenging Chinese banking regulation. Regulators came down hard, eventually sending him into hiding and wiping out $850 billion from his companies. And Terry Gou's misstep is just the latest controversy at Apple's biggest manufacturer in late 2022. Violent protest at Foxconn factories, workers upset about wages and lockdown restrictions. Then there's the demand side. Signs Apple may be getting squeezed there as well. Reports that Chinese retailers are offering iPhones at steep discounts, some going for $200 below retail research, showing iPhone sales down 4.5% in China from the 14 model, and Jeff noting it's no longer number one in China, losing out to Huawei. Apple's close ties to China have been a driver of its success, but increasingly it's becoming a liability. So why doesn't Tim Cook just move its supply chain elsewhere? The answer: there is no Apple without China. It comes down to a $1,000 iPhone is impossible if it's not produced in China in the late 1990s. Apple was on the brink of going under, struggling against Microsoft and IBM. Well, Apple was about 90 days away from going bankrupt back then in the early days. China was central to its turnaround. The country had a huge low-wage workforce with manufacturing skills not found in the US. You could take every tool and diamond maker in the United States and probably put them in a room. They were currently sitting in China, and you would have to multiply football fields. This shows the difference of the manufacturing power China has compared to the US. At the same time, China itself was investing heavily in infrastructure and tech to promote economic growth. It poured billions of dollars into constructing Apple campuses out of nothing, paving roads, building houses, even entire airports. That scale, talent in infrastructure has made it possible for Apple to replicate that supply chain anywhere else. Cook understood that for Apple from a margin perspective, with its Foxconn relationship, the way it was going to separate itself was China. More than 95% of iPhones, AirPods, Macs, and iPads are now made in China. And Apple gets about a fifth of its sales from the country's $74 billion in 2022, easily the most of any American company in China. When Tim Cook was asked about the size of Chinese market in the future, will there be at some point in the near future a bigger market than the United States? Cook said yes. I am certain as I can be of that. The numbers tell me that, and not just the numbers of people, but the numbers of people moving into the middle class, that for a consumer company is the thing that really begins to grow the Chinese market in a big way. Apple has been trying to diversify its supply chain. It began manufacturing a small percentage of its flagship phones outside of China for the first time with the iPhone 14. India has been a major focus. It went from making 1% of iPhones in 2021 to almost 7% in 2 years. But experts say it is a steep hill to climb as much as they talk about moving the supply chain and some sort of threat outside of China. You know, we think that's something that's going to be almost impossible, at least in the near term. China also has reasons to keep its relationship with Apple. Apple is a source of pride with China within Beijing, from President Xi downward, and that's why it's not just the second biggest employer. When you look at the supply chain at peak iPhone season, but they like having Apple retail presence. It also gains a powerful American advocate. I'm actually encouraged by what I've heard most recently coming from the US and from China. Hopefully we'll see some changes. Apple has a history of lobbying against policies in Washington that would limit trade with China. Cook is 20% politician, 80% CEO. He knows China probably better than any CEO out there. And you know that's been one of those balancing acts because China needs Apple, Apple needs China. In China, Apple abides by their laws, which aren't as stringent. The New York Times has reported that Apple puts Chinese customer data on state-owned servers, potentially giving the government access to emails, photos, and locations. And a terminated Apple employee claimed that supervisors told him any app that criticizes the Chinese government should be taken down. There's a lot of unofficial messaging that goes on to make sure that things kind of go in a direction that the Chinese government wants. It's just interesting because Apple Times has been so righteous about protecting the identity, and they seem to stand for a lot of these things that really I would think free speech fits right in there with, and the ability to communicate and not being held hostage by a place where frankly the rule of law and the human rights and a lot of big issues are big problems. The problem is now that Apple has married itself to China. The country may have too much leverage. So if China says, hey, we want more concessions, Apple really has nothing to bargain with. Geopolitical risks raise uncomfortable questions about Apple's control over its supply chain, a key part of the Wall Street thesis that has helped make Apple the most valuable company in the world. Tim Cook has a doctrine going back decades: own and control the primary technologies behind Apple products, but China is where Apple is increasingly vulnerable. The pandemic exposed that when Apple repeatedly delayed the launch of its phones after lockdown shuttered factories in China. The amount of influence that China can have on Apple's numbers is actually very stupendous. That said, Apple has faced headwinds before and has always come out on top. Every few years, everyone's thinking this is going to be the black swan moment, yet Apple comes out and cooks smelling like roses. It's not just Apple married to China, it's Tesla, Nvidia, and AMD, Qualcomm, Texas Instruments, Broadcom, Nike, Estee Lauder, Wynn Resorts, Skyworks Solution, and much more companies in the S&P 500. If you want to own China, the stock to buy is Alibaba. That's why Apple is married to Alibaba. You are such a good boy for watching my video right till the end. Bye.